on and so forth.
Basically what you're saying is it's a form of self-love to create a boundary.
Mm-hmm.
I think because you are respecting yourself and making sure that you respect your time and letting that confidence what you're saying, the confidence of saying that to somebody, that's self-love. You're saying,
Yeah.
I choose me right now in this moment.
How are you doing this week?
I'm doing good. I am in that vacation mode already.
You're going to be traveling next week.
I am. I'm leaving Sunday, getting on a real plane, and taking off to Asheville, North Carolina for a week, one whole week.
Why are you going on this trip?
Well, first I want to say that Max and I are both going together. So this is our first trip and we're both vaccinated fully. So we might feel less stressed about the situation. But people don't wear their masks correctly. So that might be very stressful, like in the airport. But I'm going there for my brother is getting remarried. So he's already been married and divorced. And this is his second wife. And he's actually eloping and coming back to this kind of cabin that he's renting for several people to stay in and celebrate their marriage together.
I didn't ask you, does your brother live there? Why are you going there specifically?
He lives in Charlotte, so it's about 2.5 hours from Asheville. And the Asheville is in the Blue Ridge Mountains, so it's like really gorgeous and stunning and just up in nature. Yeah, I'm really excited. Max and I are we're flying and staying in our own cabin in the mountains for 4 days or 5 days, just us, before we then go to the celebration. So it'll be a really great barrier or like time for both of us to really relax and connect and be together before.
So romantic.
So romantic. There's a hot tub in the woods, like outside. I'm so excited.
I love that. I'm so excited for you.
Thanks. I've heard really good things about Asheville too. So I'm just really excited to be there and see all the cool things. And I think it will feel pretty normal there, just considering the South doesn't really have as many COVID restrictions and people don't wear their masks outside. And I know that everyone has like their different levels of comfort right now. And so I probably will do like limited posting, but I really hope to get some good footage and cute things.
Yeah,
that's
true. It'll probably feel like a different world compared to Massachusetts.
Yeah, well, yes, and maybe in a good way.
Yeah.
Because Massachusetts is still like, I don't care. I'm going to wear a mask outside. I don't care what the CDC says. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not going to wear a mask when I go out on a walk right now. I'm just not. I'm fully vaccinated. I don't want it around my mouth when I'm walking. Like I'm outside.
It's hard. Like I've gone on a lot of hikes recently and I don't wear it like ever. And I think I see 50-50. Like some people wear it the whole time. Most of what I see is like this dance of like you kind of make eye contact with someone from far away and then you decide like who's gonna like are they reaching for something? Like, oh, they're reaching for it. Like, okay, I'll grab mine.
Oh my gosh, the hiking dynamic has changed so much. It's not like, oh, look at those people and their cute dog. It's like, oh, okay, where are we putting the mask on? We've taken away all of that other beauty with these stupid masks.
I know, it is kind of hard. Like, I was talking to someone the other day about just socializing in general and how much it's changed. Like, remember when you just kind of went for a handshake or a hug without even thinking? And now it's such a big thing. Like the other day when I was on a hike, I saw two people run into each other
Yeah.
And the woman was like, "Oh my God, it's so good to see you. Are you vaccinated?" Because they were like this, and
Oh
she's
my
like, "Yeah, I
God.
am." And they're like, "Oh, okay." And they like, went for a hug, and we were like, "Wow, is that the future? Like, is that just what we're gonna be doing?"
Yeah. And the next one is going to be like, oh, have you got your booster yet?
I know, I know, I know.
It's just going to keep going. And yeah, it's really interesting the changes that we are facing and all of this. And it's nice to talk about and acknowledge them because I think they affect us more than we really know. Even that like conversation that you saw, that run in that you saw in the hike, like over time, seeing that over and over, it's got to do something to our
Yeah.
brain. So
So I know
yeah.
in previous conversations, you kind of
Mm.
talked, you've mentioned quite a bit about your family, and I know you expressed some nervousness about
Mm-hmm.
going on this trip. What have you been doing to prepare and protect yourself?
Thanks for saying that. I do have an interesting relationship with my family. My brother and I aren't very close, and my mom and I were, I guess, in limbo of a repairing relationship. So
Hmm.
things aren't really quote unquote normal, and there's a lot that's unsaid between all of us. So heading into this, it's very easy for me to try to keep the peace, but I'm also a very outspoken person if I feel like I'm being attacked or if someone's not understanding something the way that I have hoped, I will be really honest and almost harsh when it comes to my mom. And I just am nervous that I'm going to stir something or something's going to happen with my sister and my brother. So it's honestly been a month long preparation for myself. You know that I've gone through many conversations back and forth on whether or not I was even going to go
Right.
because I thought I could I should have just protect myself. I shouldn't go for that sake. But a lot of my friends and close family have lost a lot of people this year, like
Yeah.
really close people. And that really made me think things through a little differently. Like, when is the next time I'm really going to see my brother? When is the next time I'm going to see my family? I haven't seen them in 2 years. So, what am I really protecting myself from? So, in preparation for this, I've had to do a lot of like mindful work, which is a lot of the reason why I'm focusing so much on my body and eating really healthy and trying to cleanse my system inside and out to have the best structured mind and try to understand that like whatever anyone else is whatever is going on with somebody else is their own stuff and it is
Hmm.
not mine and I don't need to take it on.
Right.
um, so in preparation, a lot of mindfulness work, a lot of working out and eating healthy. And this week I was presented with a boundary issue that occurs in my life often. And it's been preparing me to set the boundaries that I need to set with my family. So that's my answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How, I mean, I think this question is like two parts. Like,
Mm-hmm.
with the specific encounter, like the most recent
Yeah.
situation, but also just in general, like how do you set those boundaries? How do you approach that?
Yeah. So I think it depends on like what happens in the space between setting the boundary and letting someone know that they need to back down or back off, and what happens to you in that by saying no. I think that that's something we could talk about. And then just to piggyback off of our couple conversations ago about like sexual energy and being flirtatious, and you know how I was telling you about that's just kind of my way. I'm very charming and open, and somehow I allow people to think that they can cross a line. And a lot of the times I get that. And then I don't know how to stop it because I have a harder time creating boundaries, but I know now how I can prepare for that. Um, so the specific encounter this week is of an artist friend who I made a few years back at
Mm-hmm.
the store I was working at. And he's a collage artist. He's great. Like, he teaches kids who are on the spectrum of autism because he is. And he is just this really eccentric character. And we've remained friends, I would say. Like, you visit my studio, I visit your studio a couple of times, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it was really interested in one of my paintings, a recent one that I made. And since then, since he has claimed he wants it, he has been making me things, like making me collages, and he's been doing these rings, these really extraordinary pieces of jewelry. And he's been like thinking of me about doing this, and which makes me think he doesn't want to purchase my painting. He wants to trade.
Oh.
Um, right. But the, okay. The story is that he is very excited about things that he makes. So he'll just keep asking me questions and tries to visit me all the time and has been blowing up my phone for like several weeks. And in the midst of these conversations, I've had to say, I don't text. I'm shutting off my phone. I'm not around on the weekends, like really making it clear that I don't want to have these conversations over the phone. And if I'm interested in seeing him, I will reach out to him.
Yeah.
So I struggle with this because in my past as a young girl, I used to get a lot of, once I started to become like this pretty young girl, I started to get a lot of attention for things I didn't quite understand yet because I was so young. And some really dark stuff and some really just kind of your casual, oh my gosh, your hair is so pretty, I'm going to give you money. Um, like, here's 50 cents, you're so cute. And oh, when you're older, you are going to be so stunning. You're going to be like so hot and so gorgeous. And these are the things I would get as a young girl, like all the time. And so there was a year where I put my hair under a cap and literally just hid because I didn't want anybody seeing me. Which I think there's this stems a lot of the perception issues I have.
You know what? I think there's something that's like kind of an underlying thing about everything you just talked about.
Yeah.
And I had this realization that like so often you and I connect and we have these moments where we're like, oh my God, me too. And it's like, oh, that's just like us. Like we are so connected. But every now and again, we hit a topic or a situation where we have differing experiences and
Mm-hmm.
experiences that actually, even if we wanted to overlap in any way, it wouldn't be possible. And I think this is one of them because you are a woman and I will never
Yeah.
have that experience. And I think that there's a lot of problematic, oh gosh, it's hard to like sum it all up, but there's a lot of problematic energy stuff,
Yeah,
history, sexism, like all this stuff that comes
totally.
along with like existing as a woman and like feeling like you owe people or like you should be
Yeah,
so thankful for the attention and
sure.
so on and so forth. And I feel that you haven't said it, like, and maybe it wasn't even a part of what you wanted to talk about, but I just thought it was interesting. Like, I felt it kind of underlying in all these situations where, well, I'll let you continue, but that was just something
Yeah,
I noticed.
well, it's just hard being a woman. I
Yeah.
think that that's the reality, and you won't ever experience that, but I won't ever experience being a man, let alone a gay man, which is what we could come into together is probably just the boundary and saying no. Like, I think we could both maybe find some common ground in that respect, where
Totally.
if you're online dating, say, and you get into conversation with someone and they you're not into it anymore and they want to continue, how do you say no? And like, even in person, if someone's like really into you and you're kind of like okay, I have a boyfriend, or I have something, if that's that type of energy. It could be work related too. I mean, boundaries doesn't have to be necessarily like, I don't think this guy is necessarily interested in me. I think this
Right.
is just his personality.
Yeah.
However, he has made some comments over the quarantine era, which made me really uncomfortable.
Mm.
And I ended up telling him, I don't want you to think of me in this way. And that's why this is making me uncomfortable.
Hmm.
And he's a
Good for
really,
you.
yeah, thanks. I was really proud of myself in that moment for saying actually exactly what I thought.
Why do
Like,
you feel like there was any hesitation? Like, why did, like, you're proud of yourself for a reason?
I'm proud of myself for saying what I'm proud of is saying exactly how I felt, instead of layering it with excuses or trying to say more than what I really need to say.
Is that something that you would do in the past?
Yeah, and even still today when I
Oh,
texted him that I needed him to stop, I kept finding myself typing out like, I'm really busy right now, or I'm going on vacation soon. I don't like, he doesn't need to know this
well,
stuff.
that's what I'm curious about. Why do you think you do that? Well, I think we all can relate, but I'm curious from your perspective, why do you think you do it?
Yeah. So I think it's a couple of things. I think
Hmm.
boundaries are really created when you're growing up, like with your parenting, with the parenting that you
Yeah,
have.
yeah.
So I do think we learn a lot with what we are like how we're respected as kids,
Hmm.
to how maybe there was a lack of parenting on my end with the emotional aspect of things.
Yeah.
Like, I could be left alone and no one would come and see if I'm okay. I could be in a room full of men and my parents will be talking to all of them and I'm just alone, right? There's kind of a lack of awareness with my younger self, flooded with older people a lot of the times. My mom, as you know, is an alcoholic, so she was in and out of rehab. So we had a lot of different groups of people in our life, in the course of our life, because she would be in AA for like a period of time. Then all of the AA people would be in our world and we would go to their houses and hang out there. And then there were, she would be back into drinking. And then we had that group over our house playing cribbage and drinking Budweisers and smoking cigarettes. And it would be totally different elements in all of these phases. There wasn't really a time where I was a center of that, and my parents were really focused on their own lives, which they were really young. We were all not planned, like very clear about how they treated the situation when I
Hmm.
was young. So I do think there is this like boundary issue that is learned when you don't have people looking after you.
Yeah.
So, do you agree?
Yeah. I was gonna say I really relate to that experience. And I wanted to add that, it's funny, like I'm just a naturally curious person. And
Yeah.
I think probably about at least half the time I ask you questions that I don't even necessarily know how I would respond, or what my own answer to my own question would be. And, everybody struggles with setting boundaries. And um, I think everybody relates to that hesitation, that thing that we all do that's like, oh, sorry, my phone was dead. Like I was really busy yesterday. Like, why do we apologize for being unavailable? And I wanted to ask you that to
Yeah.
see, if you could dig in and figure out for yourself, like where that might come from. And I think you're so spot on. And I really, through hearing you talk about your experience, I think I can find my own truth within it, like about my childhood, like as you're just describing yours, like I remembered
Mhm.
being a kid and experiencing the same thing with the alcoholic dad and
Yeah.
being left alone a lot and also being asked to do a lot. Like
Yes.
my brother being here, moving to California, like we've always been close, but there's another layer of closeness now where we're talking about all these things and his experience is so validating of my own memory of
Yes.
what I experienced. And I find myself getting kind of emotional hearing him talk about it because it makes it that much more true.
Yeah.
And, he's like talking about how he viewed me as pretty much like the only person that cared about him and like another, like a father figure. And, nobody really dropped us off at school or picked us up. Like I did that for my brother. I made him dinner and took care of my dog. And we were left alone a lot. And I think the
Yeah.
responsibility was on me to do a lot.
Right.
And so as a kid, to your point, it's like you're not even necessarily being asked to do a lot. You're actually just expected to do a lot.
Right.
And I think that's where like boundary issues come into play as an adult because it's almost like a reflex, like, I'll just do it. I'll just, and if I can't, I'll apologize or I'll feel bad. Um,
Yeah. The feeling bad and apologizing, that's definitely something we should get to.
yeah,
But I think the older we get, we do realize we don't owe anyone anything. Like we are existing as our own with our own human experiences, and so are they.
right.
But for some reason, there's this disconnect that there's like a loose cable in my system that feels like I need to tend to that person. And like maybe it is because like we grew up just expecting to take care of things and expected to basically survive. And we did. I there were years where I did take care of my sister too, and I was the one that cooked us dinner. And my mom and my sister and I had a house together after my parents split. But my mom ended up getting into this abusive relationship after that. So we basically, my sister and I were living alone. And I was a senior in high school. So I was just trying to like get to college. But then I have my sister who's 4 years younger than me, barely scraping by. I mean, she's barely going to school. She's barely participating in any sort of things and with kids her age. um that was really tough. She's 4 years younger than me, and I think, how old is your brother? He's
He's 6 years younger, so
6
similar.
years
Yeah.
younger. Yeah, so when there's that big gap, you have totally different memories. But what I have found with my sister, to respond to what you said about your brother, is like we have very similar experiences. Now, she had harder times than I did because after I did go to college, things got worse. But we have very similar feelings about how we were parented, and there's so much connection. It just brings us together in our adult world because we're able to sympathize with each other and also, like you said, validate the traumatic things that have happened to us. We're not alone in those
Yeah.
memories.
I think for me, this is all pretty connected because it mean I don't know, maybe you'll tell me you have a different experience, but
Mm.
for me, like for the most part, I felt like I was crazy. Like even from my mom's perspective, like different family members, most of them are like, I don't get what the issue was. I don't get why you're saying these things. And to have I know what my experience was. I know how I felt. I know what I experienced. Like, so I don't need my brother to validate it. But it is really amazing, I guess, to not feel crazy and to have that validation and to be
Yeah.
able to tell stories from the same point of view, in a lot of love and respect for each other. And yeah, truthfully, most of them, like, it's crazy to hear you talk about your experience because it's so similar to mine. Like
I
our younger
know.
siblings, and I felt guilty leaving my brother. Same thing.
Mm.
Like he was getting into some
Yes.
trouble, and
Oh my
we
God.
didn't really have any rules. Like we were left alone a lot. Like my mom wouldn't come home. Similarly to your experience, like my mom and my brother and I were in this apartment, and my mom was dating a lot, and she didn't come home for periods of time. I don't really know how long. So it was just us, well, just me figuring out how to take care of myself, get through high school,
Get
and look
through.
out and like sort of be a parent.
Yeah.
But I'm a
Yeah.
teenager, so like I tried.
Yeah.
It's really sweet to hear my brother say, like, I remember when you told me this, and I really took it to heart, and almost like I was teaching him like lessons and trying to guide him, but I wasn't prepared for being a parent.
No, of course not. Neither was I. I
Yeah,
only knew the structures from when I was even younger. Like I knew
yeah,
that dinner needed to be made and we needed to get to school, and that was basically it. Um, but what I am thinking about when you're talking about this hard stuff is that in those years, or in that year, or however long that happened, when we were the people taking care of everything and not having the preparation, I do want to say, like, I've been thinking about how it's not just us, right? Like, we did have some inner support from other people, our friendships that we had, the other family members in our life that maybe we could rely and count on in some ways. I want to ask you if you had any other outside, like, people that were helping you or
oh,
knowing what was going on,
I
because
didn't.
I did, but I didn't utilize them.
It
So
might
like,
have been that.
yeah,
It
like,
might have been that.
yeah.
I Yeah, it's hard to
And
really go down that road of like what if, but I know I didn't have any.
well,
Like luckily my mom was probably the best person in my life, but she would even
yeah,
admit
she's
like
great.
she made a lot of
Yeah.
mistakes, and we've had a lot of heart to hearts, and she apologized, and she said if she could go back in time she would and change things, and
Yeah.
that means a lot.
Yeah.
But I didn't have any other help or anyone to go to and talk to.
Yeah.
I'm sitting here trying to think about who I.
Well, my point was really more like, even if you did,
Mhm.
you wouldn't be really telling them everything that's going on because you wouldn't want to burden them, and you didn't want to, it would
Mm,
basically, right? Like, you probably needed, you just kind of understood that this is what you needed to do.
mm,
And asking for help is difficult because the situation is not normal. So you would be scared to create an upheaval of family coming in and trying to save or help. I mean, I don't know, but I think maybe it comes from the same place that when we're setting boundaries, we don't want to hurt somebody else. And I'm wondering
mm,
if it comes from that same place. Like, I'm trying to go back, and sometimes I have this like inner child in me that, well, a lot of the times I have a child in me that doesn't realize I'm 30 now. Like, she's still questioning and still apologizing and still, and my friends and I talk about this a lot, how we have to kind of like talk to that girl and say, hey, you're 30 now, so you can't, it's okay, you can say no, you can say this is uncomfortable and that you need your
mhm.
space. You don't need to feel bad, you're older now. Like, there is this talking to these other people that come out because of our experiences that we've had in childhood.
Well, yeah, that's like the best part about this whole story is like
Hmm.
you and I are leaps and bounds better at setting boundaries than we were when we were teenagers.
Oh
And
God.
I remember the biggest thing was the excuse thing. Like, there was no excuse. The reality is, everything I was experiencing, I did actually acknowledge as a burden. Like, I felt like it was all a burden. And, I did it all like as best as I could. But there was no excuse that I could come up with to change anything. And college actually was the best thing. Like, I was like, that could be my way out. Like, because then it's a distance, right? Like, I'm too
Yes.
far. Sorry, I
Yeah.
just can't. It's like too far away. And I was right. Like, I left, and everything got better. Like,
Mm. Yes.
I, it just changed so drastically. And even though the location changed and there was a physical boundary between my family, doesn't change the fact that you're gonna have complex relationships no matter where you
Sure.
are. So I definitely struggled again in college in
Hmm.
ways that were less intense for sure, which is great, but still, a struggle.
Yeah, well, distance can truly separate that anxiety that you might have on the day to day with your family. Like, but then when you like go home for the weekend, all of that anxiety that you've pushed to the side because a distance comes. So it's like even grander when you go back home.
Hmm.
That was my experience. I was like, oh, this is great to have the distance. Everything is better, but everything is also worse because I'm not there. And well, my timeline was that's when my sister really got into trouble when
Hmm.
I left.
Yes,
So I
yeah.
have so much guilt and shame around her self destructiveness because she didn't have me. And she didn't really even use me as a tool while I was taking care of her. She was very mean to me and it was really hard to stay cordial with one another because she probably wanted my parents and I wasn't our parents. Our parents weren't always terrible. So when they split and our dad disappeared, it was just confusing. And she was just in need of that structure and that life that we used to have, where I was like, sayonara to this shit show. I'm leaving. But the, yeah, the distance
Yeah,
is,
I relate to a lot of that. I will say that my
yeah.
brother was never mean to me. That's like one difference. Like, when I
Hmm.
was thinking about my experience compared to yours, like, it's
Hmm.
I think my brother and I just took what we could get. Like, I don't think my brother wanted my mom or dad, or I think he would have liked it, but since that was the norm, like, he took what he could get, which was me, and we always got along. And um, then when I left, similarly, like, things kind of fell apart there. And I do feel bad about that because he was just kind of by himself, and he
Hmm.
lived with his friends a lot,
Yeah.
and things like that, to
Yeah.
try and find like a structure in a family. But I think he just struggled, you know.
Of course. Yeah. Lack of people in his life. But going back to the boundary thing, this is all related. And if I'm not able to speak fully on a subject, I do think there are ties to not having this structure, this parent, and a lot of the guilt and the shame that we hold on to comes out when we have to make a decision to tell someone to back off, I think, or when you're faced with an experience where you're having to protect yourself with your own words rather than using other things to protect yourself. Like,
Yeah,
I,
I don't.
yeah.
I will say I don't have a lot of experience creating a boundary without the excuse, which is unfortunate. It's something that is really nice to talk about because I'm going to have a whole new level of awareness and hopefully implement some changes. But
Hmm.
I really stuck to the distance excuse a lot with my family, and I haven't gone back. I didn't really go back for holidays. I haven't done Christmas or anything for
Yeah,
probably like 10, 12 years. So I
same.
just
Yeah.
kept my distance. And then
Mhm.
I think in other aspects of my life, I usually come up with some kind of excuse, which is a shame because hearing you talk about, like, I actually said my truth with this particular situation, and it felt really good to set a boundary. And I didn't come up, I felt like I wanted to come up with an excuse, but I didn't. I just said how I felt, and I set the boundary, and it felt really good. And that's exciting to hear that it's totally and entirely possible to
Yeah.
do, and to do it and not feel guilty. Like, that's like the
Right.
goal, right?
Of course it is. And I want to touch on having to set these boundaries with specific people and how you might get different reactions. And I
Yeah.
think that that fear and what stirs up in me before I have to say no is what I'm actually projecting, what I hope they don't say. Like, I am already thinking the worst, that they're going to be super hurt by me, or they're going to get angry at me, or
Hmm.
they're going to lash out at me. And then I'm going to have a war that I don't know how to fight. And that is directly correlated to my father and I, and the amount of screaming matches that we would get. Excuse me, sorry for my child. He and I don't get in fighting matches that much. But my dad and I would have this. My dad is a narcissistic alcoholic. So he is just in his own world. Nothing else matters. So to try to reason with someone who's narcissistic is extremely difficult. But as a young girl, as like a teenager, we think we know everything. So that was even harder. I mean, it was like talking to myself, basically. My dad didn't really grow up. So I know that all of the reactions that I'm fearful of are what his reactions were to me when I tried to be honest and tell him my feelings as his daughter on certain subjects, like them, my parents splitting up, or him finding another woman, or being there for us as a father. Like, how come he disappears? Like, all of these questions I would ask, and he would kind of come back at me in a really not so healthy way. And
Hmm.
I think I'm met with those anxieties when I have to say no to somebody. Um,
That makes
yeah.
sense. Like,
Yeah.
where the fear comes from. I wrote that down. I was curious if you ever experienced a time where you set a boundary with an excuse or not. I guess it doesn't really matter, where it went well, like that.
Yeah. So I was going to say that this guy that I'm specifically talking to is
Hmm.
always really open to hear what I have to say.
Hmm.
Um, although I still get nervous. So I'm just triggered in from the experience of having to say no, even though I know he's going to understand and take it really well. Like, he says I said, "Hey, like, I've told you countless times I'm not going to be able to see you this week.
Hmm.
I would really appreciate if you just respected," I'm really sorry, respected my boundary.
You need to set boundaries with Ruth.
I really, really do. You're so correct in that. I'm just gonna let him out and set the boundary of the door in between us. Okay. Yeah, so he had a great response where he basically said, "Thank you for being so candid. I'd hoped you would tell me. I get this a lot, so it's just my
Oh,
personality. Um, I appreciate you telling me how you feel, and I'll catch you when you're back." Like, he was
oh,
just
amazing.
really sweet about it. Yeah, like, he knows himself really well because he's kind of on the spectrum.
Hmm.
So he has done a lot of soul searching. But anyways, my therapist and like really helped me through it this morning. She was the one that kind of got me out of the anger part. Like, I woke up to like 3 text messages to him, and it's like not answering my his questions, like where am I going on vacation and like how long, and he really it was so urgent for him to give me these gifts, and it was like, I didn't even ask you for these gifts, like why is it so important for you to give them to me? So it could be because he is interested. I don't know really what's going on in his brain, but either way, we're kind of talking about that space that is created when we're triggered by something that's really annoying us. Like, what do we do in that scenario? Yeah. And so I really directly correlate it to these boundary issues that I had while growing up.
Yeah, I think a part of it too, at least speaking for myself, is that I'm a person who generally likes a good amount of alone time and quiet time, uninterrupted time. I could go on and on.
Mhm.
And that's because I'm an artist. Like painting is a one-man sport. I like reading, I like meditating, I like
Yeah.
working out. There's a lot of things that I like to do by myself. And I think if I had to guess, I probably, in comparison to a lot of other people, spend more time alone than most. Um, and I think in the context of what we're talking about, this doesn't really matter, but um, it is something worth noting that like you and I might require more boundaries, I guess is the point I'm trying to
Right.
make. Yeah.
Well, and I with our time,
Yeah.
because our time is precious
Yeah.
to us as artists, it actually is really hard to find that time to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
So I was really triggered by how much he wanted to see me when I haven't even been in my studio for 3
Great.
weeks.
Yeah.
This is the first week where I have access in 3 weeks, and then I'm leaving again. So of course I could say that to him, right? Like,
Right.
oh, my studio's been, shut down. But no, he doesn't need to know that. Like, he actually already does know those things, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
He has been trying weeks and weeks, and he goes into Porter Mill and he looks into my studio and he sees that there's construction going on. So he's been like actively trying to get these things to me for a while.
Mm.
And but I think like what you're speaking to is this isolation that we have naturally as artists, and that can either really help us move forward or it can bring us more of these triggered like feelings of guilt and shame. And I sometimes teeter on both sides. There's like this every month, this really slow, long pendulum that swings from really isolated, loving to be alone, loving my time with myself, to then swinging to this, holy shit, I'm so alone. I need people. I want to be around a crowd. I need their energy to fuel me.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very interesting time right now where we are really isolated more than ever.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think like my point was more about the need to be alone, like
Need,
talking
yes.
specifically, I guess,
Okay.
even about art making, and how sometimes that feels like not a good enough excuse. Like you can't actually
Mhm.
say like actually
Oh,
being really, really
yes.
specific, even with
Right.
this particular situation you're dealing with,
Yeah.
like you couldn't actually say like, I'm so sorry, I actually have to paint today. Like for some reason, I carry that guilt. Like when I try and come up with these like excuses for
Mhm.
setting a boundary, I can't actually use my art making practice as one. Do you
As
relate
an
to that?
or not an yes,
Yeah.
because we don't deeply find the same value in our practice as it would be if someone was like at their 9 to 5 job sitting at their desk.
Yeah,
Yes.
because I think there's a perception that we can just paint whenever, and like, again, part of the setting boundary thing, how we like kind of make up these fears in our mind. If I was you, I would be thinking like, well, he might just show up at the studio, even if I say I need to be in there painting. Or he might say like, oh, you can paint later, like I'll just be a minute. Like, no, pretend like I'm literally in like a huge executive meeting. Like, it doesn't matter that I'm by myself.
Right.
I need, it's a need, it's not a want.
Right.
Like,
It's a
yeah.
need. And what people don't really know, and maybe they can access this somehow in this conversation, is that it takes preparation. So think of us as an executive person, like heading into a meeting, but it's us going into our studio to work on a painting. We have to prepare. We have to prep our materials. We have to clean them up at the end. But not only that, is like, even when I've spent this much time away from my studio, I can't just go back in there and start working as if I've been there for 3 weeks. It's going to take a little bit of reentry, and it's going to take some
Mhm.
time to get that flow going again and that connection with my work again. So the first week of me being back might just be me sitting there looking at my work and staring at them and being with them and having that time where I'm working with them. And that doesn't feel like I can just say that I'm working, right? Because I'm just sitting there staring. I'm not physically acting. But we do have to understand that that is the same amount of value as someone in an executive meeting at a corporate office. Like, that time is precious. And I actually did say that in my text message to him.
Oh, good.
I did use those words. My time is very precious to me.
Oh,
I would
wow.
really appreciate if you could respect that.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
really wonderful. Like, good for you. I'm really kind of
Mm,
jealous in
thank
a way.
you.
I'm like, I should do this
Mm,
more. I think this
I don't
particular
know if
talk.
you'd want this more.
No, I don't want the situation, but I just love like the kind of level of confidence and
Yeah.
clarity that you have and like what you said and how you said it. It's very wonderful. I just think like in particular now, like, I always had like a 9 to 5 job and an obligation where it's like people know not to contact me because I'm at work. And now it's like, I think I had a little bit of trouble setting boundaries in the
Hmm.
last 6 months or so because people think that like art making is just hanging out all day. And like, no, actually, like, how about, for example, I just said, like, I just want to be totally left alone from 9 to 5. How about that? Like, just assume I'm like doing something really important and I can't be interrupted. And like, that's my boundary. I'm not going to text. I'm not going to answer your call. I'll respond later.
Hmm.
And I think maybe it's just the anxiety in my own brain, but I think the perception is like, it's not a good enough excuse like that I'm not actually in a meeting. I'm not that I'm like choosing to ignore them or like that it's personal. It's like it's not personal. It's just like I am working.
But it took you a lot. It took you some time to learn that, or learn that you had a hard time setting those boundaries, because we've never been amounted this much freedom to actually work on our work.
Mhm.
So when we were working full time, we would work harder in the studio because that time was cut short. And
Mhm.
so now that we have this, where we are more full-time artists, where we have this time, I remember when I first quit my job and started painting, I would be like leaving my studio constantly to go get coffees with someone, tea. I was finally available for lunches so I could like meet up with you when you were during in your lunch hour, not
Mhm.
realizing that it was directly affecting my work because I couldn't even believe that this was my full-time job.
Mhm.
And for a while, I kind of said, my excuse was like, oh, this is me networking and connecting with other artists. And it was actually me not valuing my time in the same way as when I was working full time. It was just like a mess. Like, I could have been producing so much more, but I really didn't know how to set the boundary when someone's like, hey, are you in the studio today? Like, a lot of people were excited when I became a full-time artist and they just
Mhm.
wanted to come by. And it's extremely difficult for any artist for someone to just pop by, because
Yeah.
there is parts of our brain that are still activated, and where what we're working on. And even if it's just like packaging stuff or putting stuff in, it's like you still have to use your brain. Like
Hmm.
I could put in something upside down or forget to put in a business card if someone's directly in front of
Yeah.
me. So those things, when you think about productivity and setting boundaries against and value your own work, it's like when you really break down the times and what you're working on, it does help you see the value in it. Like, I don't know if you've been in the chapter of The Artist Way yet, where it has you break down the time it took you to do each thing all day.
Oh, wow. No.
No? Oh my gosh. It seriously, like, it was like a pie chart of like where you're putting your time. So there's
Hmm.
like two different exercises, where one is a pie chart of like what where you're putting your most energy, where you think you're putting your energy towards, and then you get to see like where you're lacking in that circle.
Yeah.
And then there's a list. You have to break down what you did in the week and how long it took you to do each thing. And it was really revealing. And I was like, oh, okay. So packaging all those paintings actually took me 3 hours. It didn't take me all day, which is what my brain was telling me it was doing.
Mm. Yeah.
We're so derailed from the boundary thing, but we'll bring it back soon. I
Well,
just,
as
yeah,
always, for me, it's like it's all very connected. Like,
it
I mean,
is.
I boundaries are like a really big topic. There's like a social
Mhm.
boundary, a friendship boundary, boundaries with your
Yes,
partner, boundaries with
yes.
work, like,
Hmm.
and we're kind of floating in kind of, meandering through like a lot of different situations. But um, the way I work and how my work is perceived is a boundary that I've struggled with. Like
Yeah.
hearing you talk about like, yeah, when I was a full-time artist, like the perception was that if I was in the studio, I was available. Like that, bingo. That's like
Yes.
what I
Yes.
experienced. And I had trouble trying to like justify, like, I know it's just me and it's not a meeting and there's no social pressure, but I need uninterrupted time. And I actually, to this day, like, I think most of the time I make up an excuse. I don't actually just say, like, I'm in the studio, I need uninterrupted time. I don't think I've ever said that before.
Oh my gosh, really? I say that constantly.
Yeah, it's,
What do you
this
say?
this is like the beautiful thing about this whole project and why we started it is like we're not experts and we're not perfect at
Mm,
everything, and like everything's a work in progress.
yeah.
And I'm curious about this particular topic, and I thank you for bringing it up. But I am in no way, shape, or form like an expert at implementing these changes and observations. I'm on the journey. Like I
Oh
want
yeah,
to
me too.
set more boundaries in a clearer way. I think I was curious about times where you had a positive experience with setting boundaries because I haven't really had a lot of
Mm,
good ones. Like even I remember when I was dating, like different people had higher expectations about the frequency that we would see each other and talk and
yeah,
text. And
yeah.
a lot of times I'd be like, I would try and set a boundary or even just say like, I'm so sorry. I'm like, I'm not interested in pursuing a relationship. I
Okay.
think 99% of the time, the reaction was really negative for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's good to translate this into the dating world,
Hmm.
because it brings up very similar things in our regular day life.
Yeah.
Um, so you would have these not so good experiences when you would say, no, this isn't working out. And see, this was the hardest part about dating for me. When I was single, I went on the app, right, for like a few seconds, and I dated. I saw guys for maybe two times,
Hmm.
three times for one of them. And I was really what I thought was clear. And what would happen to me is that they wouldn't believe me.
What do you
Like
mean?
they wouldn't respect what I was saying. Like, I am not wanting to do this. I'm not at a time where I'm ready to give my energy to our relationship. I'm sorry. um I think you're great, but this is just not working out.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens, and I don't know if it's just because it's a female thing, where it's not necessarily a negative um, response, but it's a manipulative response to get you to come back. So I don't know if you've experienced that either. Like, most of the time when I'm like, no, like, I get, it's like they didn't actually hear what I said. Like, they're like, oh no, she doesn't really mean that. So I'm going to continue trying, and I'm going to continue texting her and asking her out. Like, and it's so frustrating because that just makes me really think that I'm not good at setting boundaries.
Wow, I have not. Literally, I would say 99% of the time, it's like actual anger. Like, they don't try and convince me of anything. They're just like, well, why the fuck did you like lead me on? I'm like, I didn't like, we went
Oh,
on like one date. Like,
yes. Yeah. Like, okay. Yeah.
but a lot of times it's easy to forgive and forget because we are so fueled by ego. And like,
Yeah.
I'm just like, you know what? His confidence, his ego, it's all, I just shot it down. Like, he is upset that he is rejected, and he's
Yes.
reacting to those like inner demons, and it actually has nothing to do with myself. Most of the time I never felt sad or guilty. I'm like, this is their own thing going on.
Oh,
um,
yeah. I don't relate to that. I think that guys can have a way with making me feel worse for them that kind of brings that, like, makes me continue texting them. Like,
oh geez,
it's horrible. And I
the guilt
really
thing.
hate the guilt thing. And with you, it's like there's this anger, and you, if they just had, if these guys just had responded the way they probably wanted to, like the ones that you have, right? Like, deep down, these guys that are responding to me in this way are feeling that way. Like, why did we hang out for so long? I can't believe you just want to give this up. Like,
Mhm.
100% I know that's what they're thinking, but they're not saying that. They're just trying to coerce me even more until I have to be like, this is what I said. Please respect it. Thank you. Goodbye. Like, until I have to get mean, or not mean, but just more stern. And
Mhm.
now I'm learning that that should be the first thing. If I'm really feeling an instinctual boundary setting cut off, let me tell you how I know how this is going to go, just right there, nip it in the bud,
Mhm.
then that's what I want to do from now on. If I, because now I really do have this understanding that as a woman, as a female, we aren't believable the first or second or third time around. Like,
Yeah.
unfortunately, my yeah, my therapist told me this morning, she's like, so have you told him that you don't text? I said yes. And she's like, have you told him that you don't, I told her that. I said, I don't want you to feel this way towards me. And she was like, well, unfortunately, you might have to tell him again and then again and again. Like, people just don't want to hear what they don't want to hear. I mean, they don't take it in because they're
Yeah,
so hurt.
right. It's all about the self, like the ego and
Yeah.
all of that. Like, um,
The self, the ego.
yeah, like
Yeah.
it's kind of crazy how easily it can be threatened and broken. Like, and I think from your perspective, well, actually, both of our perspectives, it's about like the challenging of that. Like, she's, or they're trying to like set this boundary with me. I'm either, in my case, like gonna react with anger and hurt, or in your case, I'm gonna react with like this guilt thing slash manipulation. And I think, like, you, to
Yes.
your point, I'm just repeating what you said. Basically, it all comes from the same place. And as much as like I think we're trying to normalize like setting boundaries with confidence, without excuses and without guilt, I think we also need to respect boundaries when people set them with
With
us
us.
and how we respond. And even if we respond nicely, be aware of what's going on internally. Like, what's going
Yes.
on? Is my like feelings hurt? Do I
It-
feel rejected? Do I feel upset? Like,
right.
deal with those negative emotions in
Yes.
a healthy way.
Right. And I think that's why it was really good that I was caught in that moment of anger and I could have completely responded with my angry self in that moment. It was really great that I had a session because I
Mhm.
like opened the Zoom call and I was like, this is exactly what's happening right now and I need you to help me out with this. Like, I need to work through what's going on right now. It has nothing to do with like the actual response I'm going to do, but what is going on with me? What is so triggering with this text thing that, I do get a lot of anxiety when people send lots of messages to me. Like, it just is like this poke, like, hey, you have to respond right now. And it's like, I don't have the capacity at whatever time you're sending me these messages to respond to you. So I get really like I get like because I feel bad I can't, so I'm just
Right.
triggered.
You want to know what I thought about since we began this conversation? I don't want it to end without me saying it.
Yeah.
I just want to normalize like not responding urgently. Like, why do we need to respond to a text a day later saying like, oh my God, like I like something happened with
So
my like
sorry.
what if we just normalize like I saw your text, I read it, and like later on in the day I read it again, but I didn't feel like I wanted to respond. Like, why is so crazy? Like,
I don't know
uh,
because that's all I do. I'm
yeah,
like,
like
I
I I think, when I'm really reflecting on the topic of this conversation, and then also the relationships in my life, I am becoming more aware of the fact that I gravitate towards people who have similar boundaries, meaning like you and I are on par with like the frequency that we text. Same with like my friend Ethan, he will fully like call me one time, and sometimes I am busy, or sometimes I just don't feel like talking, and he won't leave a message and he won't text. It's just like, hey, I tried to, like, we're good. And I don't even text. I don't say like, oh, sorry, I was busy. I don't respond. I don't even acknowledge it. It was just like, I
yeah.
tried, I missed you. And then maybe the next week I'll call him and maybe he'll pick up, maybe not. And when he doesn't apologize. There's no
Yeah.
text. Like, and I could go on and on with all these friends and
Yeah.
people like my brother, Taylor. Um, I will respond when I want to, when it feels good. And a lot of the
Right.
people in my life do the exact same. And I like
Yeah.
that easiness and how
Mhm.
natural the conversations flow and the way we communicate. But I wonder sometimes if that's just like based on fear. Like, as soon as it gets difficult, I kind of back away and I just kind
Mm.
of keep people where it feels easy close. And
Well, I'd like to mention that we were never taught or prepared for these modes of communication to change so rapidly,
mhm,
right? Like, we grew up in a system
yeah,
where dial up internet was a thing and we had
yeah.
house phones where we would leave messages and that was it. And then the pager came and then the cell phones came. So, like, we weren't prepared for this change, right? So
Mhm.
we're still and most of us are really like really want slow communication, but because of
Yes.
this instant gratification lifestyle that we are now living in, it seems like it's become rude not to respond right away. Or and I don't know where that emotion came through. Like, I don't know where the rudeness decided to pop in there when we don't respond. I can see, like, waiting a week or two on an email which I've done plenty of times over this quarantine
Mm-hmm.
because I just can't muster up the energy to respond. It takes me hours to send
Well,
an
the
email.
action is okay, but how do you feel when that happens?
Yes,
Like
yes.
during that whole
Oh,
week?
horrid,
Yeah,
horrid. Like, so it eats me. It eats at me. I'm like, just send the
yeah,
message. Like, or I'll wake up in the middle of the night and be like, oh, I didn't respond to
yeah,
that. And it's been like 13 days.
yep. Yeah, I think this is all like if people
Hmm.
listen to this and they don't relate to this, like I just would be so shocked. Like this is
Oh,
the
of course.
realest shit ever.
It is.
And the problem is like we all feed into it to some degree. And also to give us a little bit of an allowance here is like some of it's not our fault. Like these inventions and modes of
Yeah.
communication where there's like read receipts and different
I was gonna.
noises and like these cues that basically are like you said, like a poke, like a
Mhm.
this is urgent. Like
Yeah.
I know you saw my message because I got a red receipt. And so I swear to God, if you respond a day later, like I'm gonna be talking shit about you all day. Like, why do we do that?
Well, I think it's funny that you bring up the red receipts thing because Max and I have this new friend that we were texting and she has her red receipts on and his reaction was, "Oh damn, she has red receipts. That's boss." Like, and I was like, "Is it?" And then I was like, "It is because if you don't decide to respond, you know that you've read this and you're deciding not to and exchanging that decision with the person without saying a word."
Yeah, I guess I agree. My brother had red receipts on all the time. I think he just recently turned them off, and I never thought to ask, but I am going to. Um,
Ask.
and it didn't change our communication. Like I would see the red receipt, and he would respond like a day later, 2 days later, and I never thought. I was just like, I don't. I'm not a person who responds negatively when people don't respond, and I see the red receipt. But I realize fully that it's a thing that people get angry about.
Yeah. Okay. I think that it would be fun if we both decided to, for a week, put our red receipts on
I'll
and
do it.
see.
Yeah.
Yeah. And experiment to what our feelings are around that.
Yeah. I think our
Yeah.
feelings, and also, I wonder if it would literally change anything, like the nature of the conversations, or, I don't even know what would happen. I've
I
never had them on,
wonder,
but
you know, the reason why I end up checking a lot of my notifications throughout the day is because my notifications are on. And I have
which,
like this, like Instagram DMs and
oh, okay.
like messenger DMs and my yeah, you get those little like one or two or the little red dot and it has to be the
Hmm.
fucking color red. And it
Yeah.
just makes it feel so urgent every time. And I'm so connected to those pokes because I just feel like, oh, I need to see them just to get them off my screen because I don't like
Hmm.
seeing a
Visual
screen with
clutter. Yeah.
visual clutter. Right. So I'm visually decluttering, but I'm not reading anything. And then everyone thinks I've read it because I've opened up the DM and it says seen, or you know what I mean? And then I feel like,
Hmm.
shit, I'll have to get back to that later. And that is stressful, but maybe I should just turn off the notifications. They don't pop up on my phone or
Yeah.
turn everything on mute so that it doesn't, or do not disturb.
Yeah. I would totally recommend that. I've experienced all kinds of different situations, but for the longest time, like years and years and years, I don't have notifications at all for Instagram or Facebook or any social media. The only thing I get notifications are text messages. And there actually was a time when I had them off, if you can believe that, if you can even fathom it. It kind of seems crazy even for myself. Like, would I do that again? But yeah, I had all the notifications off, and the way I operated with my phone was just like when I check it, it's just going to be empty. And if I choose to click on the text messages, if I choose to click on Instagram, I'll see the messages and respond when I'm ready. So it kind of makes the read receipt and all that's the scene thing obsolete, because I'm only gonna respond when I pick up my phone and I'm ready to, but it's not going to be influenced by a notification. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's just coming from a different place. It's not influenced from that like poked messaging
Yeah,
system.
because I would say
Yeah.
most of the time it is influence, even if it's a small influence. Like when I see the text message, um, even if I don't respond, I think about it like for a day, 2 days, a week. I'm like, I need to respond. I need to respond. And if I didn't get the notification, I would be absent of that.
Right. And it's like, what world can we live in if we're not interrupted by these thoughts and having these like fears of getting back to people? Because we have full, what we don't remember almost is that we have full control over that. We can put our phone on do not disturb for most of the day and then set a time between 6 and 7 where we look at our phone,
Mm-hmm.
we respond. um I think that it confuses people when I'm on Instagram. If I put up a story, I will like just do that to keep my algorithm kind of running, to be honest. And
Mm-hmm.
if I'm having like a beautiful moment, I'm like, ooh, I'll share this. And then I will literally just share it and put my phone down. I won't get sucked in. I'll just do
Yeah.
it. But people think I'm alive and I'm on there. So they then spark up conversation with me or ask me questions. And then I'm like, see that my phone is blowing up and I'm like, I don't know. Um, blah, blah, blah. And so anyways, it's just a tool that we could 100% control if we wanted to. I could still put on no read receipts or anything like that and still post to Instagram.
Yeah, exactly. That's a really good point that I think everybody can relate to, which is like, I'm glad you brought it up because I experience it like daily. When for example, I'll get a text message and I don't respond to it, but I'm like on a walk and I take a photo of like a mountain and I want to post it to Instagram stories. There is a major thought in my brain, which is like, oh, man, okay, I actually can't post what I want to post because I didn't respond to that text, and they'll see that I used my phone and it'll be an issue. So when I get home, I'll respond to the text, and then before I go to bed, I'll do the Instagram story. Like that's fully
Uh,
happened to me, fully,
I have
completely.
actually, no, I've done that too. I'm like, I can't not text back and then post a picture of what I'm doing because
Why
then
do
they'll
we do
know that I'm
that?
on the internet.
Why do we do that? Why
I
do
don't
we
know,
feel guilty?
but well, I will have to say on the other side of that. So
Yeah,
like if I'm trying to text my sister and then I go
yeah.
on Instagram and I see that she's like posting and like literally like posting all this stuff, I
Mm-hmm.
get like offended and I'm like, but that's just my sister. If it was somebody else, I wouldn't. If it was my
Well,
sister, it's one thing because I'm
yeah.
like, hey, why don't you
I
talk to
think
me?
I think on some level that is normal, like a little bit of this like what the heck, like I thought we
This like
were closer, or
rejection.
something.
Yeah.
But one thing I wrote down early on in this conversation is that the nature of relationships are different. Like my expectations of Devin are very different than my expectations of you. Does that make sense? Like, you know,
Oh
you
yeah,
are
of
gonna feel you're
course.
gonna feel different about your sister than you do, like, I don't know. Like there are
Yeah.
people, I guess the point I'm trying to make is like when I call Devin, I do expect him to pick up, to be honest.
Yeah.
When I text him, I do expect a response pretty
Mm-hmm.
quickly. And I don't expect that of you. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying that's right or wrong, but that's my personal experience. Like,
Right. Well, yeah. Well, we develop different relationships with different people. And I think
yeah,
like when it comes to our personal lives, it's definitely we're more affected by their lack of response. And I think that that could be a real projection on our part of feeling all this guilt if we don't respond because we're actually just
seeing
taking
ourselves.
on
Yeah,
seeing ourselves in that position,
yeah, yep.
which is really
Damn, it's come full
interesting.
circle. Like,
I know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it's hard to assume that everybody's on the same page as you. Like for me,
Mhm.
like I said, my expectations of you are different from Devin. So
Yeah.
you don't ever need to feel guilty for not calling me back, texting me back, whatever, because that's my that's how I feel about
Well,
you. I
you
don't
know
put
that.
yeah, but I wonder about other relationships, other friendships where it doesn't feel clear, how there's a potential where
Yeah.
maybe friends feel a sense of like stress or anxiety about this same topic, because there isn't like a sense of clarity about boundaries.
Yes. I think it's funny that we both have similar expectations with each other. We never even talked about
Right,
those things. We just
right.
feel it from one another. And I think that is really rare. Even in my close friendships, I
Hmm.
don't think there's a clear boundary of whether or not I'm going to respond. It could be obvious if I don't respond to some of my friends. They'd be like, oh, yeah, of course you didn't respond. But I don't know if that makes them angry or not, right? Like, I don't know if that upsets them or makes them feel hurt or if I've hurt people by not responding. With you, I just
Yeah,
know that it's okay. And that's why we're such great friends
yeah.
because there's no, yeah.
Maybe I'm just, yeah, I don't know. Like, I like when it just works, and maybe that's a bad thing. Like, the whole point of what we're talking about is like having the courage to say what
Mm,
you want and be like, hey, I'm not gonna I don't know. I'm not. We don't even necessarily need. I don't need to come up with
well,
an example, but you know what I'm talking about.
yeah, I do. And I also think texting is really a dangerous path of like tone miscommunication and not understanding truly what someone means or says. That's why I don't really have in depth conversation through text, because
Hmm.
it just doesn't feel worth it to me. And I've lost a lot of my some communication with some of my closer acquaintances because I'm not in that communication mode of continuing a genuine relationship if it's not in person. And yeah.
Yeah, there is like times where I sporadically am like a texter. I would say with my brother, we text a lot. And there definitely were moments in my life where it was convenient, where I didn't feel stressed about it, where I was maybe in the car in the passenger seat, texting my brother, kind of back and forth. But I never felt pressured to. And there is a part of me that will get into texting at times, but it does scare me where it feels like it's expected. I can definitely think of a few people where, like you described earlier, where it's like text, text, text. I don't
Mhm.
respond the next day, they text again, and it starts bothering me. Or even where I'm kind of going back and forth with someone and they'll mention something like, oh, I'm so glad you're a texter because that's pretty rare. And I get so
Oh,
much anxiety. I'm like, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean to text you this much. I just happened to be like,
no, 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 no. Don't get me wrong. I'm just in a moment right now
yeah,
where
like
I have the time, the space, and I'm
don't
giving that
expect
to
this.
you.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes. Like, remember that one time that we texted a lot and like, that's not me. Like, that was just me at a time where I was given the space and the energy to, yes. Oh, I just repeated myself so badly, but it's just true. It's
Yeah.
like, it's so much anxiety when like people think that that one conversation is the way that you are and all of creation.
Yeah. I think what we
Yeah.
arrived at here is like we are really complex. Like
Yeah.
I can't sit here and confidently say like I want to communicate with people the exact same way all the time, every day. Like the reality is my thoughts and feelings and desires might change. Like, my situation with my brother is a good example. Like I might feel like I have more time and space to have like a back and forth some days versus others, and it's gonna change. Like like
I'm listening.
yeah,
It is good.
that
Sorry,
that
Rue is just at the door.
that
Yeah.
stuff is gonna change day to day, month to month, year to year, and that's okay as long
Yeah.
as like we have the ability to set boundaries and communicate. I think is a big thing.
Well, and work on our emotions of guilt and shame around it, because
Yeah,
we don't actually necessarily need to like be better at boundary setting. I think we need to be better at allowing ourselves to not feel bad if we're not responding.
that's probably the biggest thing about this whole entire conversation, and probably the hardest thing is the guilt part.
Is the
Like,
guilt.
how do you deal with it? How do you respond
Well,
when it comes up within yourself? Like, what do you do when you're on day 7, you haven't responded to the email? Like,
well, yeah. I
that's
also
hard.
I do think that it varies from specific modes of conversation and communication and what we're talking about and who we're talking to.
Hmm.
Um, so I do think that there's different answers and thought processes through each of those things. But like this morning when I was talking to my therapist, just give an example of this one scenario, is that she said, why do you feel like, why do you think you feel so guilty? Just like how you're asking me.
Hmm.
And I said something like, well, I feel like it's my fault for like I like let him do this so that it feels like it was my energy that made him do this, or was like the way that I said something at one point, or you start to question whether or not it's you
This is the
that's.
stuff that I think is more connected to being a woman. That's like my little interjection, but continue.
Yeah, I think so too. I think maybe that's the separation, right? Because, and she was really kind to saying, well, yes, you have this energy about you, but that energy is wonderful. It's not supposed to be what you think is bad. Like if people cross the line, that's on them, but your personality is wonderful and you should love that part of you, basically, in her words, saying that.
Yeah.
And I
Hmm.
think that's really something that I am trying to work on, is actually loving the parts of myself that I might be fearful of, that's gotten me in trouble in the
Hmm.
past. And it's really hard, I guess, being a woman and trying to tie those and make those connections.
I totally agree with that. I think that's wonderful. Like I think it's worth saying again, like setting boundaries shouldn't have anything to do with changing yourself or
Mm-hmm.
um,
Yeah,
feeling guilty. Like, I mean, easier said than done, but
sure.
you shouldn't change who you are or make up excuses. Or even my experience with like keeping people where it's natural and easy close, and kind of giving up on the people where it feels hard. All of those situations I think could be made better if we were able to set boundaries
Yeah.
and be clear and confident, and check in with our childhood self and say that that's
Yeah.
not real, and so on and
Right.
so forth.
Basically what you're saying is it's a form of self-love to create a
Mm.
boundary,
Hmm.
I think, because you are respecting yourself and making sure that you respect your time and letting that confidence, what you're saying, the confidence of saying that to somebody, that's self-love. You're saying,
Yeah,
I choose me right now in this moment.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really well said. I like kind of arriving at that point in
Me
the
too.
conversation.
Yeah, I just think these are all things people can relate to, and
Yeah.
they happen in everyone's world, no matter if you're an artist or not an artist. It's just who we are as
Mm-hmm.
people. This is twirled in our DNA, whatever it is. But this is so relatable, and everyone's going to be able to feel this. Like,
Yeah, I think a lot of times, like throughout the past year with us meeting weekly, there were so many conversations where we're like, why don't people don't talk about this? And this is one of those things I don't
yeah,
think people really talk about, which is kind of a shame, but
it it
it really
is.
will be relatable.
Yeah, for sure. I would love um, if we added a part where we try to encourage everyone to comment or talk to us about anything that you want about boundaries. And if you have any questions and if you're struggling with your own relationship with boundaries, like know that in our membership Patreon account, we are open to hearing what you have to say too. And we want this to be a really safe place for everyone to talk about their struggles. And we are trying to say, hey, we're doing this too. We're going through this as well.
Hmm.
And so I know that in our $12 tier, we have advice. We have an advice column that no one's entered into yet. So I'd be really curious to see if this is somewhere that someone needs advice and we could
Hmm.
offer that support. And just comment on if, just don't be shy to comment on our posts. And we love to hear from you. It just helps us to know that we're making good things and stuff that is relatable to you. So I just want to say that and remind everyone that we love to hear it.
Yeah, and we will respond to, like, I know,
Yeah.
if you write like a comment like I want to respond either in the comment or respond in the following week's conversation, or maybe it's going to take
Mm-hmm.
the form of the advice column. But um, yeah, the response will be maybe in multiple forms.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
it could be. I noticed we do have a couple new members, and it would be really nice to communicate. And it could be through Patreon or an email.
yeah.
So, yeah, for sure. I love that. And yes, we talk about how we don't like want to respond to people, but we will respond to you. That's one thing that we have put our time and energy and blocked in time for this work. So,
Well, the core of this whole project was doing just that, like having conversations that are connected to a wider audience that people they can chime in and feel like they're communicating with us. That's like why you and I started meeting to begin with,
yeah.
is to get these thoughts, feelings, struggles out and have it be heard. So of course we
Mhm.
want to provide that for as many people
Yeah.
as we can.
Yes. 100%. And we are taking into account how different weeks we are talking about different subjects. And
Hmm.
for me, the most fluid conversations that we've had are really about this stuff. And if that rings true to other people as well, then these are the types of conversations you and I would have, like without the record button on. So
Yeah,
I love
we
that. We're
uh,
getting better.
yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the audience probably feels that too, where the conversations that are about this kind of stuff, but not just that, the stuff that we're going through in the
Yeah.
moment, like
Mhm.
so many of the best conversations we've had start out with, how are you? What are you going through this week? And the
Mhm.
conversation stems from the thing that's coming up
Yeah.
very presently. And I don't know
Yes.
why, I've just been loving, I respond really well to prompts and little challenges that feel accessible to me. And um, you've probably noticed I've incorporated a lot of them in my little texts and the blogs. And um, to incorporate another challenge, um, as a listener, like, what's coming up for you this week? Like, put it in the comments,
Yes.
and start the sentence with like, this week I'm thinking a lot about blank, and I'm just so curious. Like, I maybe like a whole conversation could stem from that.
Yeah, I really respond to prompts as well, but I also like on the offhand love working through thoughts with you.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that it can be sometimes hard because we derail so often. And there are also times that I'm catching where I'm not actually listening to what you're saying. And what I respond to is totally off base because I'm in my own world of trying to figure out my thoughts. So it's just interesting to look back at these and also recognize our own growth and our own humanistic challenges that we face while doing this.
Yeah, it's very human, this whole
It is.
project, the nature of our
I know.
conversations, and who we are as people. Like, it's all
Mhm.
a very human experience
Yeah.
that's documented. So yeah, a lot of times I don't want to forget a lot of things that are coming up as you're talking. So I'm, doing the same, like trying my best to be really present. But you probably noticed I like write a lot of things down. I'm like, oh, this makes me think of this. And, I want to come back to that. And yeah, writing little
Yep.
notes has been really helpful.
Yeah. I actually stole that idea and did it today, and it really helped me stay on track. So,
Oh, yeah, I've been doing it for a few weeks now. And
yeah.
specifically today, like I fully recognize, like I'm looking at stuff I wrote down, like I would never have remembered to go back to that if I didn't write
No,
it down.
exactly. I know, right?
Because we go so quick and we like move
We
on to the
do.
next thing, and
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Well, I love these exercises we can bring to this week and these prompts, and excited to get some responses if people feel so inclined. And if not, that's okay too.
yeah, totally.
Um, yeah. So, um, cool. Well, I will miss you next week.
Yeah, I'll miss you too. We will post this conversation when you're away.
Yes.
And the following week, we might have a bonus clip or some other content that will be posted the following Tuesday. So look forward to that.
Stay tuned. I
Stay
will be
tuned.
posting. I will have so much content from my trip to Asheville in terms of nature and
Hmm.
capturing beautiful moments. I'm very excited to be in a different landscape and be in the greenery mostly. And then when we get back, it's going to be like real spring here, which is going to be very
Yeah.
exciting to come back to. So I will be posting some things the following week about my time in Asheville. So that's going to be my content for the week. And
Cool.
one of my challenges is bringing a new sketchbook, and I'm going to start the new sketchbook when I'm there because we talked about that last week. So
Wow.
yeah.
Exciting. Yeah. We didn't really touch on that in this conversation, but so far, there'll be a vlog from Morgan, a vlog from me, a conversation, some blogs, all about sketchbook stuff. So
Yes, coming up.
yeah.
Mhm.
Well, all right.
Okay. Well,
Until 2 weeks from now.
yes. Until then.
Until then. All right. Thank you all for listening.